I slammed the truck door and grabbed my weekend bag, already picturing the quiet hours ahead by the lake. 3 days of peace at my cabin, exactly what I needed after another exhausting week managing the construction sites around Billings. The 160-mile drive from the city had been worth it just to see Glacier National Park's mountain peaks again. My name's Garrett Sullivan. I'm 58 years old, and I've spent 30 years building my construction business from nothing. Started with a beat-up pickup and a toolbox, worked my way up to owning half the commercial properties in downtown Billings. That cabin represents everything I worked for, especially after my wife Brooke passed 3 years ago. She always said it would be our retirement retreat, the place where we'd watch grandchildren learn to fish and build campfires. Now it's where I go to feel close to her memory. But something was wrong. 2 figures in white bathrobes stood on my private deck, coffee mugs steaming in their hands. My daughter Madison leaned against the railing, her dark hair catching the afternoon sun. Behind her, a man I recognized as her husband Wesley shifted uncomfortably when he spotted me approaching. "What the hell?" I muttered, my bag slipping from suddenly numb fingers. Madison straightened, her face hardening into an expression I'd never seen before. Not even during her worst teenage years had she looked at me with such cold dismissal. This was the girl who used to help me read blueprints on Saturday mornings, who'd worn my hard hat around construction sites, who'd been so proud when I landed my first big commercial contract. "Dad, you can't stay here," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Wesley and I are planning a romantic weekend." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. This was my cabin. The deed had my name on it, bought with money I'd earned pouring concrete foundations in Montana winters and framing houses through blazing summers. Brooke and I had picked out every fixture, every piece of furniture. We'd planned the deck layout together, argued good-naturedly about paint colors, celebrated every mortgage payment. "But Madison, this is my cabin," I started, my voice trailing off as the absurdity of having to state this obvious fact hit me. "I don't care," she set her mug down with a sharp clink. "We were here first, and we're not leaving." Wesley mumbled something I couldn't catch, but Madison waved him off. Her bathrobe fell open slightly, and she pulled it tighter with an angry jerk. I noticed Wesley wasn't making eye contact. The kid had always been uncomfortable around me, ever since I'd asked him some pointed questions about his work history during their engagement dinner 2 years ago. Turned out my instincts had been right. He'd been bouncing between odd jobs ever since, never quite able to hold down steady employment. "Honey, I drove 160 miles, I said, taking a tentative step toward the front door. "I just wanted to spend the weekend. Maybe we can all get out of here." "And don't bother us!" Madison's voice rose to a shout. "You're just in the way anyway." The words hit me like a physical blow. In the way? This was my property, my retreat, the place where Brooke and I had planned to grow old together, where I came to feel close to her memory, to sit on the deck where we'd watched countless sunsets and talked about our dreams for Madison's future. I stood there, bag at my feet, staring at my only child as she glared at me from the deck of my own home. Wesley looked everywhere except at me, his face flushed red above his bathrobe collar. 29 years old, and Madison was ordering me off my own property like I was some unwanted stranger. The girl who used to climb into my lap for bedtime stories, who'd called me daddy until she turned 16, who'd sobbed in my arms at her mother's funeral. The daughter I'd put through college, whose wedding I'd paid for without asking questions, whose car payments I'd covered during her finding herself phase that lasted 18 months after graduation. Brooke's voice whispered in my memory. "Be patient with her, Garrett. She's still processing the grief. Give her time." 3 years. I'd given her 3 years of patience, of understanding, of bending over backward to accommodate her moods and demands. Every time she'd called needing money, and there had been many calls, I'd written the check without hesitation. Her apartment deposit, her credit card payments, that expensive vacation to Europe she'd claimed was essential for her mental health. I'd paid for it all, telling myself this was what good fathers do. And this was what it had gotten me. "Fine," I heard myself say, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Fine, I'll go." I bent to pick up my bag, my knees creaking with the motion. 58 years old, and my own daughter was treating me like dirt on her shoes, like some beggar asking for handouts instead of the man who'd sacrificed everything to give her opportunities I'd never had. Good, Madison called out. Next time, call first. Next time, call first to use my own property. The property I'd worked double shifts to afford. The place Brooke and I had scraped together every penny to buy because we believed in building something permanent, something we could pass down to our family. I walked back to my truck on unsteady legs, each step feeling like a retreat from some battlefield I hadn't even known I was supposed to fight on. Behind me, I heard Madison's voice, softer now, talking to Wesley about their plans for dinner, planning their weekend in my home as if my existence had already been erased from their memory. The engine turned over with a smooth purr. German engineering, reliable as always, unlike family, apparently. I backed out of the driveway, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of Madison and Wesley, settling back into their chairs on the deck, already dismissing my existence. My daughter raised her coffee mug in what might have been a toast or might have been a final goodbye. The road back to Billings stretched ahead, empty and long. I'd be driving home in defeat, tail between my legs, just like Brooke always worried I would become after she was gone. "Don't let people walk all over you, Garrett," she used to say when I'd give in too easily to difficult clients or unreasonable demands. "You built this business by being tough. Don't forget that when it comes to family." But family was supposed to be different, wasn't it? Family was supposed to be the people who had your back, who respected what you'd built, who understood the sacrifice it took to create something from nothing. I'd started Sullivan Construction with $500 borrowed from my brother and a dream of building something permanent. 30 years of 12-hour days, missing Madison's school plays because I was chasing contracts, working through holidays because construction stops for no one. The first 10 years had been brutal. Brooke and I lived paycheck to paycheck, eating ramen noodles so we could make the truck payments. I remember the night I landed my first big commercial job, a shopping center that would put us on the map. Brooke and I sat at our kitchen table, looking at the contract, hardly believing our luck. "This is it," she'd whispered. "This is how we build Madison's college fund." And we had built it. Every concrete pour, every steel beam, every permit fight with the city council. It all went toward creating something bigger than ourselves. By the time Madison graduated high school, I owned 4 commercial properties in downtown Billings. The cabin came later, when Brooke got sick and we realized how precious time really was. "I want somewhere peaceful," she'd said during one of her chemo treatments. "Somewhere we can go to remember what we're fighting for." We'd found the cabin 6 months before she died. Those last weekends together, sitting on that deck, watching the sun set over the mountains, they were the most precious moments of my life. Madison had visited twice, both times complaining about the drive, about how there was no cell service, about how bored she was without her city conveniences. Now she was treating it like her personal vacation rental. Monday evening found me in my study, nursing lukewarm coffee and the remnants of a solitary dinner. 3 days had crawled by since Friday's humiliation at the cabin. Saturday, I jumped every time the phone rang, expecting Madison to call with some explanation, maybe an apology. Sunday brought the uncomfortable realization that maybe I was always too quick to surrender, too eager to keep the peace at any cost. I thought about my business competitors over the years, the ones who'd tried to undercut my bids with inferior materials, the ones who'd spread rumors about my work quality, the ones who'd attempted to poach my best crews with promises they couldn't keep. I'd never rolled over for any of them. I'd fought back strategically, professionally, but ruthlessly, when necessary. So why did I turn into a pushover when it came to my own daughter? The phone's shrill ring cut through my thoughts like a blade. "Dad." Madison's voice carried none of the warmth I desperately hoped for. Cold, businesslike, like she was calling about an overdue invoice. "Listen carefully. Wesley and I have decided. The cabin now belongs to his parents." My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. For a moment, I wondered if I'd misheard, if this was some kind of sick joke. "What? Madison? What are you talking about?" "Maxwell and Crystal Parker. It's their home now." Her words dropped like stones into still water. "You're forbidden from going there anymore." The leather chair creaked as I sat forward, my mind struggling to process what she'd just said. This wasn't a request. This wasn't even a negotiation. This was a declaration. My own daughter was informing me that she'd given away my property to virtual strangers. Madison, have you lost your mind? You can't just take my property? Actually, I can, and I am. Her voice sharpened to a blade's edge, taking on that tone I remembered from her teenage years when she wanted something and wouldn't take no for an answer. You hardly use it anyway, and they desperately need proper housing. 30 years of sacrifice flashed through my mind like a movie reel. Every 5 a.m. start time, every weekend I'd spent on construction sites instead of with my family, every holiday I'd worked because the deadline couldn't wait. The burns from welding accidents, the cuts from sheet metal, the aching back from hauling materials up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken. All of it had been for Madison's future, for the security I'd never had growing up in a family that moved from rental to rental because we could never afford to buy. It's my cabin. The words exploded out of me with surprising force. I worked 3 decades to buy that place. Madison's laugh held no humor, just cold calculation. You're being ridiculously selfish. After everything we've done for you since Mom died, something snapped inside my chest. Everything you've done for me? My voice rose to match hers. Madison, I paid for your wedding, your car, your college loans. That fancy apartment deposit when you decided downtown was more your scene. That's what fathers do. She cut me off with the casual dismissal of someone who'd never earned $1 through honest labor. Besides, you're old and alone now. What do you possibly need with such a big cabin? Old and alone. The phrase hit like a physical blow, but instead of crumpling, I felt something harden inside my chest. Something that had been dormant for too long. Something that had built an empire from nothing and wasn't about to be dismissed by an entitled child. Those are Wesley's parents. Madison. Complete strangers to me. They're family now, and unlike you, they'll actually appreciate what they're getting. There it was, the real Madison. The one who saw my life's work as something she could redistribute at will, who viewed my property as an inheritance she could claim while I was still breathing. The silence stretched between us, heavy with 30 years of misguided generosity and growing resentment. No. The word came out quietly, but with absolute finality. Silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could practically hear her surprise crackling through the connection. Madison had been expecting the usual capitulation, the familiar pattern of her father bending to her will after a token protest. What did you just say? I said no, Madison. The answer is no. You can't say no to me. That cabin is wasted on you anyway. Her composure finally cracked, revealing something ugly underneath. Wesley's parents have been struggling financially and you're just hoarding property you barely visit. The irony burned like acid in my throat. I'd been visiting more frequently since Brooke's death, seeking comfort in the place where we'd been happiest. Madison knew this perfectly well. She'd complained about it during our last family dinner, rolling her eyes when I'd mentioned my weekend plans. They can find their own housing solutions, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't scrambling to appease her, wasn't calculating how much money it would take to make her happy. I can't believe how selfish you've become, Madison's voice climbed toward hysteria. Mom would be ashamed of you. That crossed every line. Brooke would never have supported this theft, this manipulation of a grieving husband's love for his only child. Brooke had been the disciplinarian in our household, the one who taught Madison about boundaries and respect. She would have been horrified to see what her daughter had become. Your mother would be horrified by what you've become, I said quietly. Madison's intake of breath was audible. How dare you? I hung up. For the first time in 3 years, I had hung up on my daughter. The phone sat silent in my lap as my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Outside, Billings' evening traffic hummed its familiar rhythm, but inside my study, everything had changed. The phone rang again immediately. Madison's name flashed on the display. I turned it off. Sleep remained elusive that night. I sat in my leather chair until well past midnight, replaying every word of Madison's outrageous demand. But somewhere between anger and exhaustion, a different emotion began to surface. Something I hadn't felt since those early days of building my business, when competitors thought they could intimidate the new guy with the second-hand truck. Determination. Tuesday brought clarity with the sunrise. I made coffee, retrieved my laptop, and began researching property law with the methodical precision that had built my construction empire. Montana statutes, transfer requirements, documentation needs, information I'd learned decades ago during my first commercial real estate deals, but never imagined needing against my own daughter. The phone buzzed with text messages throughout the day. Madison, of course. Dad, we need to talk about yesterday. Then, don't be stubborn about this. Finally, Wesley's parents are coming to see the cabin this weekend. I deleted each message without responding, feeling a strange sense of liberation with each swipe of my finger. Wednesday morning, I drove to Preston Rodriguez's office downtown. Preston had handled my business transactions for 15 years, a sharp legal mind wrapped in diplomatic courtesy. His corner office overlooked the Yellowstone River, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the water that had witnessed Billings grow from frontier town to regional hub. Garrett. Preston rose from behind his mahogany desk, extending a firm handshake. Good to see you. How can I help? I settled into the familiar client chair, noting how different this felt from sitting across from Madison. Here was respect, professionalism, the treatment due to a man who'd earned his place in the community. I need to discuss property protection strategies. Preston raised an eyebrow but remained professionally neutral. Commercial or residential? Residential. The mountain cabin. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Someone is attempting to claim ownership rights they don't possess. Family member? The question hit like a diagnosis I wasn't ready to hear. Yes. Preston nodded slowly, his expression growing more serious. That complicates things. Family disputes over property can get messy quickly. What are my options? Several. Preston pulled out a legal pad, his pen already moving. First, we ensure your ownership documentation is ironclad. Second, we can establish additional protective measures. Trusts, LLC structures, whatever makes sense for your situation. How quickly? Depends on complexity. Basic documentation review, a few days. More sophisticated protection, 2 to 3 weeks. I thought about Madison's text message. Wesley's parents coming this weekend. I may not have that long. Preston set down his pen, studying my face with the intensity that made him excellent at reading clients and juries alike. Garrett, is someone trying to force you off your own property? When I nodded, Preston's professional demeanor hardened into something more personal. Then we start immediately. Thursday morning brought my neighbor Hunter Mitchell to my door at 8:30, arms full of equipment I hadn't expected. His eyes sparkled with the fervor of someone who'd spent the night dreaming up solutions to technical problems. Hunter owned a tech consulting business and had helped me modernize my construction company's project management systems. More importantly, he owed me a favor from last winter when I'd helped him deal with a foundation issue that could have cost him $50,000 in repairs. I had some ideas, he announced, hefting a compact security system and speaker array. If they're really planning to move into your cabin without permission, we need to send a message they'll understand. The drive to my cabin passed quickly as Hunter outlined his enhancement plan. Motion-triggered security alerts, automated lighting responses, water flow controllers, he explained, his enthusiasm infectious. The whole cabin becomes an interactive experience, completely legal, all standard smart home features, just creatively programmed. We reached the cabin by noon. Standing on my own property, looking at the deck where Madison had dismissed me just 6 days earlier, I felt something shift inside my chest. This wasn't just about the cabin anymore. This was about respect, about boundaries, about teaching my daughter that actions have consequences. Hunter worked with the focused intensity of someone who genuinely loved technical challenges. Within hours, he'd transformed my peaceful retreat into something that could defend itself. Motion detector here in the entryway, he explained, mounting a device no larger than a smoke alarm. The moment someone walks in without authorization, it triggers the security system. Strobe lights, water activation, voice warnings. By evening, every room contained motion sensors connected to lighting effects and water systems. The backup battery supply, cleverly hidden beneath the main electrical panel, would ensure uninterrupted operation regardless of attempts to disable the power. Let's test it, Hunter suggested, tablet in hand. I stepped through the entryway. Immediately, lights began flashing in a warning pattern while the security system announced, "Unauthorized entry detected. This property belongs to Garrett Sullivan. Vacate immediately." Perfect, I said, genuinely impressed. Sunday was 3 days away. time enough to prepare for war. Sunday, May 4th. The day Madison had chosen for her final victory. I positioned myself in my home office at 2 o'clock sharp, 3 monitors glowing with camera feeds from the cabin. The peaceful afternoon in the mountains looked deceptively serene through the high-definition lenses Hunter had installed throughout my property. At 2:28 p.m., a dark blue minivan appeared on the approach road camera, exactly as Madison had promised. My daughter's punctuality had always been one of her more reliable traits. Useful in school, devastating in manipulation, and perfect for revenge planning. The vehicle pulled into my driveway with casual confidence, as if the occupants owned every stone in the path. Madison emerged from the passenger side first, stretching and surveying what she clearly believed was now her family's property. Wesley climbed out from behind the wheel, already moving to help his parents with their luggage. Maxwell and Crystal Parker looked exactly as I'd imagined, retirement-aged, slightly weathered, but moving with the eager anticipation of people who'd just received an unexpected gift. They gathered at the back of the minivan, unloading suitcases and boxes with the efficiency of a permanent relocation. Not a weekend visit, not a temporary arrangement, a complete takeover of my cabin, executed with the casual confidence of people who believed their victim was too weak to resist. Wesley inserted the key Madison had obviously provided, probably copied from the spare I'd trusted her with years ago. The lock turned smoothly, the door swung open, and my daughter led Wesley's parents across the threshold of my cabin like a conquering general, claiming territory. "Make yourselves completely at home," Madison announced, her voice echoing through the entryway. "This place is yours now." Crystal's delighted gasp was audible through the speaker system. "Oh, it's even more beautiful inside, Madison. I can't believe this was so easy. Some people just don't know how to say no." The motion sensors registered their presence immediately, red indicators lighting up across my monitoring system. 4 targets inside the cabin, all technological elements ready for activation. I leaned back in my leather chair, finger hovering over the smartphone screen that would begin their education in respecting other people's property. Not yet. Let them get comfortable first. 10 p.m. arrived with the precision of a Swiss timepiece. Through the bedroom camera feed, I watched Madison and Wesley settle into what they believed was their master bedroom. The guest room monitor showed Maxwell and Crystal already unconscious, exhausted from their day of claiming my property. Perfect timing for their technological awakening. My finger hovered over the master activation control Hunter had programmed into my smartphone. One touch would unleash every system we'd so carefully integrated throughout the cabin. I pressed execute. The transformation was instantaneous and magnificent. Every light in the cabin began strobing in coordinated patterns, rapid flashes of red, blue, and white that turned the peaceful bedrooms into disorienting warning environments. Simultaneously, water erupted from every faucet, every shower, creating a thunderous symphony of rushing liquid throughout the house. Madison bolted upright in bed, her silhouette visible against the chaotic lighting. Wesley scrambled beside her, both of them shouting questions that couldn't be heard over the technological assault. Then the security system joined the performance. "Attention! Unauthorized occupation detected!" The announcement boomed from hidden speakers throughout the cabin. "You are not the owners of this property. Vacate the premises immediately." Through the guest room camera, I watched Maxwell and Crystal stumble from their bed in terror. Crystal's scream was clearly audible through the audio feed as the emergency lighting intensified. "Maxwell, do something!" Crystal's voice cracked with panic. "I don't understand what's happening," Maxwell replied, his words barely audible over the rushing water and strobing lights. Madison appeared in the hallway camera feed, her confident demeanor completely shattered. "This is impossible. Houses don't do this." Wesley stumbled behind her, trying to reach what he thought was the main electrical panel. "Where's the breaker box? We need to shut this off." But Hunter's backup systems were performing flawlessly. The cabin had become technologically autonomous, responsive only to my remote commands. Dawn light began filtering through the windows as the door locks finally disengaged. Wesley yanked the entrance open, and all 4 of them stumbled toward the exit in complete psychological defeat. My phone began ringing as they reached their minivan. "What did you do, you sick, twisted old man?" Madison's voice crackled with hysteria and exhaustion. "Maxwell and Crystal are traumatized." I adjusted my tone to express gentle confusion. "Madison, what are you talking about? What happened up there?" "The house went completely insane. Lights flashing everywhere, water pouring from every faucet, voices screaming at us to leave. "That sounds absolutely terrifying," I replied. "Did you call someone for help?" "We called the police. They found nothing wrong. Said it was probably just some kind of technical malfunction." Perfect. Completely legal. Utterly deniable. "Maybe the cabin just doesn't like strangers staying there," I suggested with perfectly calibrated innocence. "We're never coming back," she declared. "Never. The cabin is yours." "That's probably wise," I agreed mildly. Tuesday morning brought the final confrontation. Preston Rodriguez had arranged everything according to my Monday night instructions. I sat in Spencer Walsh's conference room, watching Madison and her accomplices file through the door with defeated resignation. "Spencer has some important information to share," I said calmly. Spencer opened the top folder on his desk. Mr. Sullivan transferred ownership of the mountain cabin to the Rocky Mountain Veterans Foundation. The transfer was completed Monday morning and is completely legal. Madison's face went white. "That's impossible. You had no right." "I had every right to transfer property I owned," I said quietly. "Everything is legally documented and irreversible." Wesley's confident posture collapsed. "But we had an agreement." Spencer's professional tone never wavered. "Mr. Sullivan can only transfer property he actually owns. The foundation owns the cabin now." "The charitable transfer includes a lifetime usage clause for Mr. Sullivan," Spencer continued. "He retains full access to the property until his death." As they filed toward the door in defeat, I called out one final observation. "Madison?" She turned back, her face a mask of exhaustion and rage. "Next time you try to manipulate someone, remember that business experience beats emotional terrorism. Every time." Thursday morning brought the first sunrise in 3 years that I could watch without fear, anger, or defensive calculation. I drove to my cabin through Montana's spring landscape, feeling something I'd almost forgotten existed: simple contentment. For the first time since Brooke's death, I sat completely still on the deck, watching the mountain peaks reflect in the lake. The grieving widower, who had mistaken exploitation for love, was gone. In his place sat a man who remembered his own worth, who understood that protecting himself was an act of love. Brooke would have been proud. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself again.